Sometimes, the thing that's eating you alive isn't what $1 million education tells 20 of the world's best doctors to look for. And while 20 of the most celebrated medical minds in the country couldn't save the billionaire Julian Croft, the woman who mopped their floors spotted exactly what they missed. What do you think is killing him? Before we even dive in, drop your wildest theories in the comments below. And if you love a story where the overlooked underdog holds the secret that can change everything, you have found the right channel. Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this jaw-dropping story. In the sterile, silent opulence of his $4 million private hospital suite at the prestigious Cedar Crest Medical Institute, Julian Croft was deteriorating. A symphony of quiet, urgent beeps from machines that cost more than a suburban home provided the soundtrack to his decline. Around his bed, a rotating cast of specialists, men and women with degrees from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, frowned at readouts, conferred in hushed, worried tones, and felt the chilling approach of failure. Death was a guest in the room, and despite their world-class intellects and the cutting-edge technology at their disposal, they couldn't figure out how to ask it to leave. Into this theater of quiet desperation slipped Ilara Vance, as invisible as she was meant to be. The night shift was a blessing. Fewer eyes to look through her, fewer hurried footsteps to sidestep. She inhaled the familiar hospital cocktail, sharp antiseptic, the faint, expensive cologne of a consulting doctor, and something else. Something underneath it all. A faint, metallic tang. It was wrong. Deep in the recesses of her mind, a part of her brain trained in the rigorous logic of chemistry jolted with a spark of recognition. She froze for a fraction of a second, her hand poised over a polished chrome wastebasket. Her eyes, trained by years of quiet observation, flicked to the patient. The distinct, almost jaundiced yellowing of his fingernails, the specific, patchy pattern of his hair loss, not the generalized thinning of sickness, but something more deliberate. And the most subtle of clues, a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration along his gum line. Her heart, usually a steady, reliable metronome, began to race, pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The answer crystallized in her mind, sudden and sharp and clear as laboratory glass. She knew. With a certainty that defied her place in this room, she knew exactly what poison was, slowly, meticulously, and deliberately killing Julian Croft. But who in God's name would listen to a housekeeper when 20 of the country's top specialists had failed? The Cedar Crest Medical Institute housed a secret within its walls, an open secret known only to the stratospherically wealthy. The ultra-luxury Sterling Wing, where fortunes were spent to purchase not just health, but absolute privacy. Julian Croft's suite was less a hospital room and more a penthouse at the Four Seasons. Medical equipment was cleverly hidden behind rich mahogany panels, ivy drips were disguised by bespoke art installations, and the lighting was ambient, designed to soothe rather than expose. The tech billionaire, a man who had reshaped the digital landscape, had paid for this exclusivity, demanding that America's premier diagnostic minds converge and solve the mystery of his body's inexplicable rebellion. Ilara Vance moved through this gilded cage with methodical grace. At 38, her movements were a study in efficiency, an economy of motion born from years of necessity. Single mother, night shift worker, part of the background, invisible. Yet her eyes, unlike the celebrated minds in this room, missed nothing. While they looked for exotic diseases and rare genetic markers, she was cataloging symptoms, analyzing patterns they had dismissed as unrelated. Not 10 feet away, Dr. Alistair Finch addressed his team. Silver-haired, impeccably tailored, with a voice that never needed to be raised to command absolute attention, He was the living embodiment of medical authority. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice a low hum of frustration. "We have exhausted all conventional diagnostic pathways. Mr. Croft's symptoms continue to defy a standard diagnosis. His liver function is deteriorating at an alarming rate. The neurological symptoms are worsening by the hour. We must begin to consider more exotic approaches." Ilara kept her head down, the rhythmic swipe of her cloth over a sterile surface a shield for her intense focus. She'd perfected this skill in college, absorbing dense organic chemistry lectures while her pen flew across the page. A lifetime ago before life, in all its brutal indifference, had intervened. 15 years ago, Ilara Vance had been the star of the university's chemistry department, a scholarship student on a fast track to a brilliant career in medical research. Then came the phone call in the middle of the night, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and the sudden, crushing weight of 3 younger siblings who needed someone to be their parent. She withdrew mid-semester, a piece of paper filed with the registrar's office promising to return. She never did. "The cleaning staff needs to finish up in here quickly," Dr. Finch announced, his gaze sweeping over Ilara for a moment without truly seeing her. His words were not directed at her, but about her, a verbal dismissal that erased her from the equation of the important work being done. "We have critical matters to discuss." Ilara nodded, her face a mask of practiced neutrality, hiding the familiar, dull sting. They saw the pale blue uniform, not the mind within it. They saw the function, not the person. What they couldn't see was the passion she'd kept alive in the quiet hours after her children were asleep. Nurtured with library books, free online university lectures, and scientific journals she read on her lunch breaks. Knowledge without credentials. A mind without a platform. As she wiped down the surfaces of a medical cart, her eyes snagged on Julian Croft's chart, left open by a resident. "Puzzling symptoms," it read. "Peripheral neuropathy, alopecia, severe digestive issues. Classic presentations, but they were being misattributed to a dozen separate potential conditions." They were looking at the leaves and missing the tree. Dr. Finch swept past her, his expensive leather shoe brushing her cart, an accidental contact he didn't even register. Ilara stepped back, melting into the wall, becoming part of the furniture, part of the background. "He walks past me every single day like I'm part of the furniture," she thought, a wave of cold clarity washing over her. "That's why he'll never, ever notice what I see." Her gaze shifted from the chart to Croft's personal items, arranged with meticulous care on the marble countertop of the ensuite bathroom. Expensive, imported grooming products. The hand cream, in particular, caught her eye. An exclusive boutique brand in an elegant black jar. She noted its position. It had been moved a quarter turn since she'd cleaned yesterday. Someone had used it, or moved it. A tiny, insignificant detail. But Ilara filed the observation away. In chemistry, the smallest, most insignificant inconsistencies often held the key to the entire reaction. The suite door swished open, and a well-dressed man entered. Marcus Thorne, according to the visitor badge clipped to the lapel of his tailored suit. Ilara recognized him instantly from the covers of business magazines. Julian Croft's fiercest rival in the tech world, now, miraculously, a supportive friend during his mysterious illness. "Julian's resting," Dr. Finch informed him, his tone shifting to one of collegial respect. "His condition, I'm afraid, has not improved." "I brought him his favorite hand cream," Thorne replied, his voice smooth as silk. He placed an identical elegant black jar on the nightstand, replacing the one that was already there. "Imported from a little shop in Switzerland. It's a small comfort, I know, but he insists it's the only brand that doesn't irritate his sensitive skin." Ilara watched, unseen, from the bathroom doorway. She noted how Thorne positioned the jar, prominently, angled slightly toward the bed, ensuring it would be seen and used. Something in his careful, almost curated placement of the object triggered her analytical mind. It was too deliberate, too insistent. Later, as she was cleaning an adjacent, empty suite, she overheard two residents discussing Croft's case in the hallway. "Strangest symptom progression I've ever seen," the first one said, his voice low. "It's like 10 different conditions firing off at once." "Finch thinks it might be some kind of unprecedented autoimmune cascade," replied the second. "But the tests keep coming back inconsistent, contradictory. Meanwhile, the richest man in Silicon Valley is wasting away while we chase our tails with theories." Elara paused, her hand stilling on her cart. The fragments began to connect in her mind, forming a terrifying mosaic. The mismatched symptoms that weren't mismatched at all. The mysterious, inexorable decline. Exorable. The expensive, exclusive hand cream that appeared with clockwork regularity. A hypothesis formed. A cold, terrible idea that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. But it was just a theory. She needed more observation. She needed data. That night, she subtly adjusted her cleaning schedule. She made sure to be in or near Croft's room during his sleeping hours, when the activity was minimal. She studied the updates to his chart, memorizing the new data points, the worsening lab results. With each new entry, her suspicion hardened into certainty. The pattern was becoming unmistakable, but only to someone with her specific, forgotten knowledge. As her shift ended, just before dawn, Elara stared at her reflection in the starkly lit employee bathroom mirror. The uniform, practical and forgettable. The face, etched with exhaustion, but with eyes that were still sharp, still bright with intelligence. She saw the invisible barrier that separated her world from theirs, a wall built of credentials, titles, and expectations. "They don't see me," she whispered to her reflection, the words barely audible over the hum of the ventilation. "But I see everything." The alarms erupted at 2:17 a.m., a shrill, piercing cry that cut through the hospital's nocturnal quiet. Elara heard the overhead announcement, "Code Blue, Sterling Wing, Suite 7, while cleaning the room directly adjacent. Her heart leaped into her throat. Doctors and nurses rushed past her in the hallway, their faces grim, their movements urgent. Julian Croft had taken a sudden, catastrophic turn. She paused her work, her own heart racing in sympathy with the frantic beeps she could now hear through the wall. Through the partially opened door of Suite 7, she watched the emergency unfold. It was a scene of controlled chaos. "Liver enzymes are critical. Kidney function dropping precipitously. Neurological responses are diminished," a resident reported, his voice tight with tension. Dr. Finch strode in, immediately taking command, his voice cutting through the noise. "Get me a full toxicology panel again. Stat! Something is causing this cascade failure, and I want to know what it is." Elara edged closer, drawn by a mixture of human concern and cold, scientific curiosity. The medical team worked with frantic precision. Monitors beeped faster. Nurses rushed in with crash carts and syringes of medication. "Could it be environmental?" suggested Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a younger physician, his face etched with worry. "Something in his food, his water, his personal products?" Dr. Finch dismissed the idea with a cutting glance that made the younger doctor flinch. "We have tested every single thing in this room twice, Dr. Tanaka. Focus on medical possibilities, not amateur detective work." Dr. Tanaka shrank back, silenced. The team continued their urgent interventions, and after a tense 20 minutes, they managed to stabilize Croft, pulling him back from the brink, but only temporarily. As the crisis subsided and the doctors dispersed to consult and analyze the new data, Elara slipped into the room, ostensibly to clean up the detritus of the emergency. She first checked his chart, memorizing the new symptoms, the latest terrifying numbers from his lab work. Then her eyes returned to the bathroom counter and the nightstand, to the hand cream, something about its metallic sheen, the way the ambient light caught the surface of the cream in the jar on the nightstand, triggered a specific memory from a dusty lecture hall in her university days. A lecture on heavy metal poisoning. Thallium. Ilara moved closer to the bed, her gaze forensic. She examined Croft's fingernails again. The discoloration pattern, the subtle but distinctive mise lines. She could almost see them now. The particular, almost geometric quality of his hair loss, the reported agonizing abdominal pain. She inhaled sharply, a gasp she quickly suppressed. The symptoms matched thallium poisoning. They matched it exactly as described in her old toxicology textbook. How? How could 20 of the world's leading specialists have missed something so classically presented? Was it possible? She hesitated for a moment, a war raging within her. To speak up was to risk her job, her credibility, the very livelihood that kept her children fed. To stay silent was to be complicit in a man's death. She approached Sarah, a night nurse she'd built a friendly, quiet rapport with over the years. "Excuse me, Sarah," Ilara said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but has anyone checked Mr. Croft for thallium poisoning? His symptoms, they match it exactly." Sarah's expression shifted instantly, the friendly familiarity evaporating, replaced by a cool, professional dismissal. "Ilara, I know you mean well, but please. These are the top specialists in the entire country. They've run every test imaginable. But the pattern of hair loss, the neuropathy... If you're done eavesdropping on medical emergencies, the bathroom floor needs cleaning," Sarah interrupted, her voice now cold as ice. "Leave the medicine to the doctors." Ilara stepped back, her cheeks burning with a familiar shame. She returned to her cart, the crushing weight of dismissal settling on her shoulders once more. But underneath the hurt, certainty crystallized in her mind, hard and clear as a diamond. She knew what was killing Julian Croft. The only question was, would she be willing to risk everything she had to make someone listen? As she wheeled her cart down the silent, gleaming corridor, Ilara's thoughts raced, chemical formulas and diagnostic pathways swirling in her mind. The symptoms aligned perfectly with her hypothesis. The progressive neurological issues, starting in the feet and moving up. The severe digestive problems. The distinctive, almost signature pattern of hair loss. In her undergraduate toxicology course, the professor had called thallium the poisoner's poison. Colorless, odorless, easily absorbed through skin contact, and notoriously difficult to detect unless a doctor was specifically looking for it. Its symptoms were a terrifying mimic, a chameleon that could masquerade as a dozen other illnesses, leading doctors on a wild goose chase while the victim slowly, inexorably, died. She completed the rest of her shift on autopilot, her body performing the familiar tasks while her mind was locked on Croft's declining condition. When she got home to her small, cramped apartment, the first rays of dawn were painting the sky. After checking on her sleeping children, she pulled a heavy, worn textbook from her small but treasured collection, salvaged from her university days. She flipped to the chapter on heavy metal poisoning. The words on the page confirmed her suspicions, each sentence a hammer blow of validation. Thallium. Soluble in water, colorless, odorless, tasteless, absorbed through skin contact, causing systemic damage while perfectly mimicking numerous other conditions. The next morning, driven by a desperate sense of urgency, Angela arrived at the hospital early for her shift. She was determined to find a way, any way, to make someone listen. She positioned her cart where she could observe the entrance to the Sterling wing. Right on schedule, she watched as Marcus Thorne arrived for his daily visit, carrying a fresh jar of the exclusive hand cream. The routine was always the same. He'd greet the nurses, express his grave concern, and insist that this small comfort was the only thing Julian would want. He would even sometimes apply a small amount to Croft's hands himself, a gesture of friendship that was, in reality, the perfect delivery system for a slow, deliberate, and exquisitely planned murder. Ilara weighed her options, her mind working like a chess player's. Direct confrontation would be dismissed instantly. An anonymous note had already been tried and laughed off. She needed evidence, hard, irrefutable proof that even the arrogant Dr. Alistair Finch couldn't ignore. She made her decision. The clock was ticking. Julian Croft was running out of time. Julian Croft deteriorated by the hour. Ilara tracked his decline through the hushed, grim conversations between nurses, through glimpses of updated charts left carelessly on counters. Time was a luxury he no longer had. During her 15-minute break, she used one of the hospital's public library computers, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Every search, every medical journal article confirmed her suspicion. The symptoms aligned with thallium poisoning with a terrifying precision. The specific pattern of alopecia, the peripheral neuropathy progressing relentlessly upward from his extremities, the distinctive gastrointestinal issues. But how was it getting into his system? And why in God's name hadn't it been detected? She found a piece of hospital stationery and scribbled a note, her handwriting neat and precise. Check for thallium poisoning. Classic presentation. Neuropathy, alopecia, GI distress. Look at the hand cream. She folded it and, with a surge of adrenaline, slipped into Dr. Finch's empty office while pretending to dust, leaving the note on top of the clipboard he always carried. The next morning she arrived even earlier, positioning herself near the doctor's conference room. Through the partially open door, she heard Dr. Finch's voice, laced with audible derision. "And apparently," he said, and she could hear the condescending smile in his words. "Our cleaning staff now has diagnostic opinions." A ripple of condescending laughter went through the room. Someone left an anonymous note suggesting thallium poisoning. "We tested for heavy metals in the initial workup, Alistair," another doctor responded, his voice weary. "Exactly. Standard procedure," Finch dismissed. "It's the cleaning staff playing detective. What's next? They'll be scrubbing in for surgery." Ilara's chest tightened as if caught in a vice. Her hands gripped the handle of her cleaning cart until her knuckles turned bone white. The dismissal, the public ridicule, stung more than she could have imagined. But the life of the man in Suite 7 mattered more than her pride. She had to formulate a new approach. Dr. Tanaka, the younger physician Finch had shut down, seemed more approachable, less entrenched in the hospital's rigid hierarchy. During her afternoon shift, Ilara timed her cleaning of the corridor to intercept him as he left a patient's room. "Excuse me, Dr. Tanaka," she began, her voice steady despite the frantic pounding of her heart. "About Mr. Croft. I know this is out of line, but I truly believe he's suffering from thallium poisoning. The symptoms match the classic presentation perfectly." Dr. Tanaka's expression shifted from surprise to acute discomfort. "That's an interesting theory, but as you heard, we've already tested for heavy metals." "Standard tests might miss it," Ilara pressed, her voice urgent, especially if it's being administered consistently in small, cumulative doses over a long period, in his hand cream, for example. I appreciate your concern," he interrupted, glancing at his watch, desperate for an escape. "But I really need to be somewhere. Perhaps you could mention it to the nursing staff." He walked away quickly, leaving Ilara standing alone in the hallway, invisible once more. Have you ever been in a situation where you just knew you had the right answer, but nobody in power would listen to you. How did that feel? Let us know your story in the comments. And if you are rooting for Ilara to risk everything to finally prove them all wrong, smash that like button right now to show her some love. This is where her story truly takes a turn you won't believe. Later that evening, as she was emptying trash cans at the nurses' station, the hospital's head of security approached her. He was a large, imposing man whose face was permanently set in a serious frown. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth, "we've had some reports that you've been interfering with medical matters, discussing patient care with the physicians. This is your one and only warning. Know your boundaries, or there will be serious consequences." Ilara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The message was crystal clear. Shut up or be fired. She needed evidence, irrefutable scientific proof that even Dr. Finch couldn't dismiss, but gathering it meant crossing lines, breaking rules, and committing an act that could cost her the job her family depended on. That night, alone in the deserted employee break room, staring into a cup of lukewarm coffee, Ilara made her decision. Julian Croft had maybe days left, if that. Her job security, her fear, none of it could outweigh a human life. She formulated a plan, a risky, desperate strategy that drew on the deep well of chemistry knowledge that had lain dormant, but had never, ever disappeared. She would need a few simple cleaning supplies, a sliver of access to an unused corner of a lab, and perfect, impeccable timing. Tomorrow she would force them to see what they'd missed, or she would lose everything in the attempt. Marcus Thorne visited again that afternoon, his performance of concerned friendship now looking utterly ghoulish to Ilara. He stayed only 15 minutes, but as always, he made sure the jar of hand cream was prominently placed. Ilara observed from the hallway as he encouraged the day nurse to apply it liberally to Croft's dry hands and arms for comfort. After Thorne left, Ilara began her routine cleaning in Croft's bathroom. Her heart pounded as she carefully studied the hand cream's container. The expensive, minimalist packaging revealed nothing. But the product itself, when she examined it closely under the harsh bathroom light, it had a faint, almost imperceptible metallic sheen. She needed a sample, but taking it openly was impossible. She waited for the chaos of the nursing shift change, a brief window when Croft's room was momentarily unattended. With the practiced efficiency of her profession, she used a sterile cotton swab to transfer a small pea-sized amount of the cream into a sterile specimen container she'd acquired from a supply closet. The container, no bigger than her thumb, disappeared into the deep pocket of her uniform. That evening, Ilara picked up her children, 12-year-old Marcus and 14-year-old Tasha, from her neighbor's apartment. They had grown accustomed to her exhaustion, to the homework completed without maternal oversight, to the meals prepared by teenage hands when her shifts ran long. "Mom, are you okay?" Tasha asked, her perceptive eyes noting her mother's distraction. "Just a complicated situation at work, honey," Ilara replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." After the children were asleep, Ilara spread her materials across the small kitchen table. Her old toxicology textbook, printouts from the hospital library's computer, and her own handwritten notes on Julian Croft's symptoms. The pattern was undeniable to anyone with trained eyes. So why couldn't 20 of the best doctors in the world see it? Because they weren't looking for it. Because thallium poisoning was rare, almost archaic, a throwback to old Cold War spy novels. Because they had run standard panels that were designed to catch acute, massive exposures, not the slow, steady, cumulative poisoning of a trusted friend. And because, most of all, no one ever listened to the housekeeper. Ilara stared at her pale blue uniform hanging on the back of the door, the physical embodiment of her invisibility. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she would risk everything to pierce that veil, to force them to see both the poison and the person who had finally identified it. Ilara arrived for her shift with a small, innocuous bag alongside her usual supplies. Inside was a container of baking soda from her kitchen, a roll of aluminum foil, and a few small plastic containers she'd borrowed from the hospital cafeteria. They were innocent, everyday items that, when combined with standard cleaning solutions, could create a rudimentary but effective chemical test for the presence of thallium salts. Her first task was to gather the final pieces of evidence. During the morning rounds, Ilara timed her cleaning to overhear the latest update on Croft's condition. The progression was textbook thallium poisoning, worsening neuropathy now affecting his speech, the distinctive hair loss pattern accelerating, and a rapid, terrifying deterioration despite all supportive care. She carefully collected another tiny sample of the hand cream while cleaning Croft's bathroom, confirming the faint metallic sheen when she rubbed a minuscule amount between her gloved fingers. In a seldom-used maintenance closet on a lower floor, Ilara worked quickly, her movements precise and sure. Her makeshift chemistry setup on a dusty shelf looked nothing like the sophisticated million-dollar equipment in the hospital's main lab. Yet, the principles remained the same. She'd performed similar qualitative analysis tests countless times in university labs, earning top marks for her accuracy with minimal resources. She mixed her solutions with a practiced precision, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The test, a modified version of a classic precipitant reaction, confirmed her suspicion. The solution underwent a distinct, undeniable color change. It was positive for thallium. She quickly photographed the results with her cheap smartphone. Next, Ilara used a break to review the past month of Croft's visitor logs, which she had access to as part of her duties. The pattern was damning. Marcus Thorne, business rival turned supportive friend, visited almost daily. And the timing of the most severe escalations of Croft's symptoms correlated perfectly with the days following Thorne's visits. At 2:00 p.m., Ilara learned from the chatter at the nurses' station of an emergency conference being called in Croft's suite. All specialists were required to attend. His condition had become critical. It was the perfect time. It was now or never. She went to the employee locker room, changed into a freshly laundered uniform, straightened her ID badge, and gathered her evidence. The photo of the positive test results on her phone, a printout of the visitor logs with key dates highlighted, a timeline she'd created correlating Thorne's visits with symptom progression, and several pages of research on thallium poisoning she'd printed from a medical database. Ilara rehearsed her explanation mentally, drawing on the deep well of knowledge from toxicology textbooks she had memorized years ago. As she walked toward the Sterling wing, her heart was a wild drum against her ribs, but her stride was steady and purposeful. The doctors were gathered in Croft's suite, the tension in the room so thick it was almost tangible. Dr. Finch stood at the center, presenting the latest failed interventions, his voice strained with defeat. Ilara knocked once, a sharp, authoritative rap, and entered without waiting for permission. 20 pairs of the most respected medical eyes in the country turned toward her. Dr. Finch's expression shifted from surprise to raw irritation. "This is a closed medical conference. Please come back later." "Mr. Croft is dying of thallium poisoning," Ilara stated, her voice ringing out, clear and steady, betraying none of the terror she felt. "And I can prove it." Dr. Finch's face hardened. "Security," he began to say into his phone. "The symptoms match perfectly," Ilara continued, stepping forward and placing her evidence on the conference table in the center of the room. "Progressive ascending peripheral neuropathy, distinctive alopecia, severe abdominal pain, and cognitive decline. It's a classical presentation." She held up her phone, showing them the picture of her makeshift test. I confirmed the presence of thallium in his hand cream. The imported Chamberlain brand he uses every single day. It's being absorbed through his skin. A slow poisoning, happening over months. This is utterly absurd, Dr. Finch snapped, his face flushed with anger. You are a housekeeper, not a physician. I was a chemistry honors student at Johns Hopkins before personal circumstances forced me to withdraw, Ilara responded, her gaze unwavering, meeting his. The poison is being introduced through the hand cream, which is brought regularly by his friend, Marcus Thorne. The timeline of Thorne's visits matches the progression of the symptoms perfectly. She laid out her evidence with methodical precision, pointing to the visitor logs, the symptom progression charts she had drawn up. Her explanation was precise, scientific, and irrefutable, drawing on a depth of toxicological knowledge that stunned the room into silence. Standard heavy metal panels might miss it because the poisoning is gradual, she explained, her voice gaining strength and confidence with every word. The dosage maintains thallium levels just below the typical detection thresholds for an acute event. But the cumulative effects, they are textbook. A complete, stunned silence fell over the room. The only sound was the quiet, rhythmic beep of Julian Croft's heart monitor. Dr. Finch opened his mouth to object again, then closed it, his eyes scanning her evidence more closely. Dr. Tanaka, the young physician she'd tried to warn, leaned forward, his eyes wide. This actually makes perfect sense with the symptom progression, he said, almost to himself. The tests we ran, they might indeed miss a gradual cumulative exposure. Another specialist, a renowned neurologist, nodded slowly. The hair loss pattern and the specific presentation of the neuropathy, it is highly consistent with thallium toxicity. The silence in the room deepened as 20 specialists were forced to confront the unbelievable truth of what they had missed. And, more shockingly, who had found it. It's thallium poisoning, Ilara concluded quietly, her point made. The symptoms are textbook, if you know what you're looking for. Ilara stood her ground as the doctors exchanged stunned, uncertain glances. Her heart was still pounding, a frantic bird trapped in her chest, but her exterior was a mask of calm composure. Her maintenance closet chemistry had been a wild gamble, crude by the standards of their multi-million-dollar laboratory, but it was based on sound, unassailable principles. The distinct precipitate formation had confirmed thallium's unique reaction pattern. How exactly did you test for this? Asked Dr. Winters, the group's consulting toxicologist, his voice a mixture of skepticism and genuine curiosity. A modified sodium redizinate reaction, Ilara replied without a moment's hesitation, adjusted for a field test with limited resources. The chromate color change is unmistakable when thallium ions are present. Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow, visibly impressed despite himself. That's an advanced qualitative analysis technique. It's rarely used outside of highly specialized labs. It was covered in advanced toxicology methods, a second-year special topics course, Ilara responded. The memory as clear as yesterday. Professor Harrison's course. A flicker of recognition crossed the faces of several of the older doctors in the room. Harrison was a legend at Johns Hopkins. You were a student of Harrison's? Dr. Tanaka asked, his voice full of a new respect. For one semester, Ilara answered, a shadow of the old regret briefly visible in her eyes. Before I had to withdraw. Dr. Finch examined her improvised test results with a grudging, intense focus. His formidable expertise couldn't deny the logic of the evidence before him, however unorthodox its source. The concentration pattern you're suggesting would imply a deliberate, sustained exposure, Ilara continued, pressing her advantage, pointing to the timeline she'd created. Each application of the cream delivers a sublethal dose that bioaccumulates in his tissues. The symptoms escalate in perfect correlation with Marcus Thorne's visits. The specialists began to fire technical questions at her about absorption rates, chelation therapies, and metabolic pathways. Ilara answered each one with precise scientific terminology, her confidence growing with each correct response. With every sentence she spoke, her invisibility diminished. They were finally seeing her. Not her uniform, but her mind. Dr. Tanaka pulled up Croft's latest lab results on a tablet. If we run a targeted mass spectrometry specifically for thallium, rather than a generalized heavy metal panel, you'll find elevated levels, Ilara finished, her voice now commanding. Particularly in his hair and nail samples from the past 3 months. They'll show you the entire poisoning timeline. The energy in the room had transformed completely. The dismissive, hierarchical barrier had shattered. In this moment, knowledge had proven more powerful than any degree or title. Run a focused thallium test. Immediately, Dr. Finch ordered, his voice strained, breaking the stunned silence. 2 specialists rushed from the room to comply, taking a sample of the hand cream from the nightstand and preparing blood draws. Dr. Finch remained frozen for a moment, staring at Ilara's methodical evidence. His expression was a rapid cycle of disbelief, dawning realization, and a profound, reluctant acknowledgement. "If you are correct," he finally said, his voice tight, We've been poisoning him further with some of our treatments. The chelation therapy we administered for suspected mercury poisoning would be completely ineffective for thallium." "He needs Prussian blue," Ilara confirmed, her voice firm. "Immediately, to bind the poison in his system." The specialists exchanged urgent glances, their medical minds recalibrating with the new, terrifying data. A nurse returned just minutes later, breathless. "Rush toxicology confirms," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. "Thallium at significant life-threatening levels." The room erupted in a storm of controlled chaos. Orders flew. Treatment protocols were instantly shifted. Hospital security was contacted regarding Marcus Thorne. "Check the security footage," Ilara suggested, her voice cutting through the noise. "Check the times when Thorne delivered the hand cream. He likely applied some himself on occasion to establish trust in the product." Dr. Tanaka nodded, already on his phone. "Already requested it. But how did you—" "The pattern was clear once I looked for it," Ilara explained simply. "Mr. Thorne always brought the same gift. Mr. Croft's condition always worsened immediately afterward." The head of hospital security entered. "We've reviewed the footage from the last week. Thorne manipulates the cream when he's alone in the room. We've contacted the FBI." The Prussian blue antidote was administered. Additional blood work came back, confirming Ilara's diagnosis completely and unequivocally. The room's energy transformed from desperate resignation to focused, cautious hope. 3 hours later, Julian Croft's vital signs stabilized for the first time in weeks. Ilara stood quietly by the wall, her presence momentarily forgotten in the flurry of life-saving medical activity. Dr. Finch approached her, his tall, imposing frame seeming somehow smaller now. Your intervention was—" He paused, visibly struggling with the words. "It was correct, completely correct." Ilara simply nodded, maintaining her professional composure, despite the flood of validation washing through her. "How did you see what 20 of us missed?" he asked, genuine, humbled confusion in his voice. "I'm invisible," Ilara replied, the words simple but heavy with meaning. "I observe without being observed. I see patterns without the burden of preconceptions. And I never ever forgot my training, even when life took me far away from it." Dr. Finch nodded slowly, the truth of her words sinking in. "I owe you an apology. We all do." Before he could continue, one of the monitors let out a soft chime, indicating a change. The room hushed as Julian Croft's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. What? Croft whispered, his voice a hoarse rasp. Happened? Dr. Finch stood at his bedside. A critical moment of choice played across his face. Claim credit for the eventual breakthrough, or acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. He straightened his shoulders. You were being poisoned with thallium, Mr. Croft. We missed it, all of us. He then turned, his arm extending toward the woman standing by the wall. This is Ilara Vance. She's on our housekeeping staff. She solved what 20 of the best specialists in the country couldn't. A complete, profound silence filled the room. Every eye, every shred of attention turned to the housekeeper. Julian Croft's weak gaze found hers. Thank you, he whispered, the words faint but clear. For seeing what they missed. The silence broke as Dr. Tanaka began to applaud, a slow, deliberate clap. Others joined in, one by one, until the sound of applause for the woman in the pale blue uniform filled the multi-million-dollar suite. It was an acknowledgement impossible to dismiss. Ilara stood a little taller, her expertise, her very essence, finally visible. The invisible barrier between the medical staff and the support personnel had cracked, irreparably. Sometimes, she said quietly, her voice carrying across the now silent room, the most valuable knowledge isn't the kind that's framed on a wall. The moment was interrupted as 2 FBI agents arrived, their demeanor professional and focused. They spoke briefly with hospital security, then requested statements from key personnel. That now included Ilara. We need to understand exactly how you identified the poisoning, Ms. Vance, Agent Ramirez explained, treating her with the same deference she afforded the specialists. I recognized the symptom pattern from my toxicology training, Ilara explained calmly, and then confirmed my hypothesis through basic chemical testing. And your background is in chemistry? An incomplete degree. I was forced to withdraw for family reasons. The agent nodded, his expression one of impressment, not dismissal. Your observation may have saved Mr. Blackwell's life and provided the crucial evidence needed for his prosecution. As the investigation intensified outside the room, the medical staff inside continued to administer the life-saving antidote therapy. Ilara watched as Croft's vital signs strengthened hour by hour on the monitors, tangible proof of her diagnosis. Dr. Tanaka approached, offering her a chair. You should sit. You've been standing since this all began. The simple courtesy, offering a seat to someone who was usually expected to remain standing and unobtrusive, symbolized the profound shift in dynamics. Ilara accepted with a quiet, "Thank you." Your chemistry background? Dr. Tanaka asked, his curiosity genuine. What was your focus? Toxicology and organic analysis, Ilara replied. I was beginning research on new detection methods for environmental contaminants. You would have made an exceptional diagnostician, he observed. Life had other plans, she responded, not with self-pity, but with a simple statement of fact. As evening approached, Ilara prepared to gather her cart and complete her regular duties. Dr. Finch intercepted her near the supply closet. Miss Vance, he began awkwardly. Hospital administration has been informed of your contribution. They have authorized paid administrative leave while you assist the FBI with their investigation. The subtext was clear. They couldn't have someone who had demonstrated such world-class expertise returning immediately to cleaning floors. The status quo had been so irreparably disrupted, it couldn't be pieced back together. Ilara nodded, understanding the complex, face-saving recalibration that was occurring within the hospital hierarchy. I'll finish my current duties first, she said. Dr. Finch looked startled for a moment, then nodded with a newfound, deep respect. As she completed the remainder of her shift, Ilara noticed the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. There were nods of acknowledgement from doctors who had previously looked through her as if she were made of glass, and warm, congratulatory smiles from the nursing staff. Her invisibility had been permanently shattered. When she finally left the hospital that evening, Elara paused in the vast parking lot, looking up at the single illuminated window of Julian Croft's suite. Inside, a billionaire was recovering because of her intervention. The thought brought not pride, but a quiet, deep satisfaction. The clean, elegant resolution of a complex problem. The profound rightness of a truth revealed. Over the following days, the hospital administration struggled with how to categorize Elara Vance. Her official job title remained Environmental Services Technician. Yet, she was repeatedly called into meetings to consult on Croft's recovery and provide insight for the ongoing investigation. At home, Elara carefully explained the situation to her children. "So, you solved a mystery that all the rich doctors couldn't?" her son Marcus asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and awe. "I noticed something they overlooked," Elara corrected gently. "Sometimes being in a different position lets you see things that others miss." Tasha, more perceptive at 14, understood the deeper implications. "Will things change now, Mom? At work? Will they respect you more?" Elara considered the question carefully. "Respect isn't something that's given permanently," she said. "It's earned and maintained. But yes, something has shifted." A month later, a message arrived that felt completely surreal. Julian Croft, now discharged and recovering, requested her presence at his corporate office downtown. She arranged for time off, dressed in her best non-uniform clothes, and entered the gleaming, futuristic tower that housed Croft Innovations. Unlike the hospital, where she had navigated the corridors like a ghost, here she was met at the door and escorted with a quiet deference. The executive floor revealed a recovered Julian Croft. He was thinner and a little paler, but very much alive. "Miss Vance," he greeted her, rising from behind a vast desk of polished ebony. "Please, sit. I've wanted to thank you properly since I regained full consciousness." Elara sat, acutely aware of the dizzying role reversal. The man whose room she had once cleaned was now offering her a chair in his personal domain. "I'm glad to see you're recovering well, Mr. Croft," she responded simply. "Recovering understates it. I'm alive." "Because you saw what others missed," Croft said, his gaze intense. "Dr. Finch explained your background. Chemistry prodigy, scholarship student, an education interrupted by family tragedy." Elara nodded, surprised at how thoroughly her life story had been investigated. "Intelligence like yours shouldn't be wasted," Croft continued, his voice firm. "I've established a new educational foundation. Its purpose is to support brilliant minds who have faced financial or personal barriers to completing their education. You were its inspiration, and you will be its first recipient." He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside was the documentation for a full scholarship to complete her chemistry degree at Johns Hopkins, a living stipend generous enough to support her and her children comfortably, and a guaranteed placement in the Cedar Crest Medical Institute's toxicology department upon her graduation. "This isn't charity, Miss Vance," Croft clarified, noting her stunned expression. "It's an investment in exceptional proven talent. The hospital, by the way, has already approved your position. Part-time during your studies, full-time after graduation. They're rather eager to have your expertise on staff. Officially." Elara's fingers traced the edges of the documents. Dreams she had packed away and buried under 15 years of hard work and sacrifice were suddenly, breathtakingly, tangible again. "My children," she began, the practicalities still swirling. "The stipend covers all childcare and tutoring needs," Croft assured her. "All practical obstacles have been addressed. The only question is, are you ready to reclaim the path that was taken from you?" That evening, Elara sat with her children at the kitchen table and explained how their lives were about to change. Their eyes widened with pride and disbelief as she recounted the full story she had previously minimized. You saved a billionaire, Mom?" her son asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I used the knowledge I never stopped building," she corrected gently. "And now we have a new chapter ahead of us." 2 weeks later, Elara Vance entered the main gates of Johns Hopkins University, not through a service entrance, but through the grand main doors. She carried a student ID for her morning classes, and in her bag was a hospital badge for her new afternoon internship in the toxicology lab. In the hallways, Dr. Finch would nod stiffly when they passed, a gesture of professional courtesy that had replaced years of dismissal. Dr. Tanaka had become a genuine friend and advocate, helping her navigate the complex transition from support staff to a specialist in training. In quiet moments, Elara would sometimes remember the feeling of pushing her cleaning cart down these same hallways, utterly invisible to the very people who now sought out her insights on difficult cases. The memory brought neither bitterness nor resentment, only a quiet appreciation for the journey's perfect, impossible arc. On her first day assisting with a difficult toxicology case, Elara stood in the laboratory, surrounded by the gleaming equipment she had once only been allowed to dust, now hers to command. The crisp, white lab coat felt foreign, and yet somehow completely familiar. The weight of a dream, deferred, but never denied. She picked up the patient file and began her analysis, bringing to the problem not just her scientific training, but the unique, powerful perspective of someone who had learned to see what everyone else overlooked. Someone who understood, better than anyone, that wisdom could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most valuable insights come from those society has trained itself not to see. 2 years after the diagnosis that changed everything, Elara stood in her graduation gown, her children beaming from the audience. At 40, she was older than most of her fellow graduates. Her path unconventional, her journey marked by detours others could not imagine. Yet as she received her diploma, completing the circle she had started decades earlier, she felt no regret for the winding path. That evening, at a small celebration dinner, Dr. Tanaka raised a toast. "To Elara Vance," he said, "who taught an entire hospital that the sharpest mind in the room might not be the one with the most degrees." Elara smiled. In her new office at Cedar Crest, once merely a building she cleaned, now her professional home, she kept a small, framed photo of herself in her old pale blue uniform. Not as a reminder of past dismissal, but as an acknowledgement of the unique strength she had gained from that experience. Her phone rang. It was a consulting request from another hospital, facing a mysterious poisoning case of their own. Angela picked it up, ready to apply both her formal training and her hard-won perspective. Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had proven her worth beyond all doubt. "This is Dr. Vance," she answered. "How can I help you?" If this story of hidden brilliance and triumphant justice moved you, there's so much more where that came from. Here at Beat Stories, we bring you powerful narratives where the underdogs rise through sheer talent, grit, and determination. Every single week, we deliver compelling tales of status flips, moral victories, and the ultimate triumph of overlooked genius, just like Elara's incredible journey from an invisible housekeeper to a respected toxicologist. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads of meticulously crafted stories that capture those perfect, satisfying moments when someone who was underestimated finally gets the recognition they so richly deserve. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.